Welcome to Myths and Sagas, the place where we tell the stories of ancient heroes and gods, stories that help the first civilizations understand the world around them. These tales aren't just old legends. They were the way people explained power, life, and what it means to be human. Today, we're not talking about a god, but about a very special man from ancient Mesopotamia. His name shows up in some of the oldest stories ever written. You might know the name of his son, Gilgamesh, but this episode is about the man who came before him, Lugalbanda. Lugalbanda was a warrior from the city of Uruk. He served the goddess Inanna and later became one of the early kings listed in Sumerian records. Most importantly, he was the father of Gilgamesh. But there's something else that makes Lugalbanda stand out. He was one of the first human characters in myth to go through a deep, personal change, not by fighting monsters, but by surviving hard times, praying and showing kindness. His story is over 4,000 years old and was written on clay tablets in 2 different poems. Lugalbanda in the Mountain Cave, a story about getting sick, being left behind, and slowly healing with help from the gods. Lugalbanda and the Anzû bird, a story about helping a magical bird and being rewarded with speed and strength. Lugalbanda's story takes place during a war. He was part of an army marching through the mountains to fight another city, but on the way, he got very sick. His fellow soldiers couldn't carry him anymore, so they left him behind in a cave with food and water, hoping he would survive. Alone in the mountains, Lugalbanda prayed to the gods and slowly recovered. This moment changed him. Later, he helped a magical bird called the Anzû. Instead of harming it, he treated the bird with care. In return, the bird gave him a special gift. He became super fast, able to run faster than anyone else. When Lugalbanda rejoined his army, he wasn't just healed. He was different, stronger, quicker, favored by the gods. This story isn't just about action. It's about patience, kindness, and growing stronger on the inside. Lugalbanda didn't become famous by leading battles or winning with force. He became special by how he handled being weak, being alone, and still choosing to do the right thing. Even though today most people remember Gilgamesh, his son, Lugalbanda, was already a respected name thousands of years ago. His name shows up in ancient hymns, poems, and records from temples. His story shows us a different kind of hero, one who wins respect through quiet strength, not loud power. In the next 25 minutes, we'll learn more about who Lugalbanda was, what the ancient Sumerians believed about him, and why his story still matters today. He may not be the loudest or strongest hero, but his journey teaches us something important. Real transformation often starts when we're at our lowest. Let's begin. More than 5 millennia ago in the fertile plains of southern Mesopotamia, present-day Iraq, rose the city of Uruk, one of the first great urban centers in human history. With monumental temples, vast city walls, and a thriving culture of writing and worship, Uruk stood at the heart of Sumerian civilization. And in the memory of its people, kingship itself was believed to descend from heaven, a sacred institution entrusted by the gods. In the Sumerian king list, a fascinating document that blends myth, dynastic lore, and political ideology, Lugalbanda appears as the second ruler of Uruk's first dynasty. His reign is said to have lasted 1,200 years. Clearly symbolic, not literal. Numbers like this weren't historical facts, they were signs of cosmic legitimacy. To rule for centuries was to be touched by the divine, part of a sacred order stretching back to creation itself. But Lugalbanda's legend isn't really about kingship, at least not the kind defined by conquests or construction projects. His story, as told in the epics, is about the making of a king. Before the crown, before the fatherhood of Gilgamesh, Lugalbanda was just one man among many, a soldier, on a perilous campaign. That campaign was led by Enmerkar, founder and first king of Uruk, and a great-grandson of the gods. Enmerkar sought to expand his rule eastward toward the distant and mountainous city of Aratta, a rich and powerful rival famous for its stone, metals, and sacred treasures. But this wasn't just a war of resources, it was a spiritual contest. Both cities were devoted to Inanna, the fierce goddess of love, war, and justice, and to secure her favor, each city claimed the right to build her grandest temple. Whoever won Inanna's blessing would win supremacy in Sumer. With that in mind, Enmerkar led his army east, marching through rugged terrain, across rivers, and into the forbidding heights of the Zagros Mountains. And among the ranks of Uruk's soldiers marched Lugalbanda, young, strong, loyal. Not a commander, not a champion, just one man among many. And then, something unexpected happened. High in the mountain passes, where the cold bit hard and the air thinned, Lugalbanda collapsed, struck by sudden illness, a fever perhaps, or a wasting disease. He could no longer continue. The army, pressed for time and surrounded by danger, faced a terrible choice. They could not turn back. They could not carry him. So they made a decision. They left him behind, and in that act, in that moment of abandonment, Lugalbanda's true story began. Deep in the Zagros Mountains, surrounded by steep cliffs and bitter winds, Lugalbanda lay motionless in a small cave carved by time and the elements. His body burned with fever, his breath came in shallow gasps, his muscles trembled with exhaustion. The world he had known, the army, the campaign, the city of Uruk, had moved on without him. He was suspended in a liminal state where the weight of flesh met the fragility of spirit. The soldiers who left him had not done so cruelly. They had tended to him as best they could, placing food near his head, sealing jars of water with clay stoppers, laying warm garments across his body. One of them even placed a carved amulet near his hands, a token of protection or a final farewell. They lit a fire at the cave's entrance, the smoke curling like a silent prayer, and whispered their hopes to the gods, asking for protection and peace. But they could not stay. The army had to press forward toward Aratta, and Lugalbanda had to be left behind. The needs of many outweighed the fate of one, and so they left him, not to die perhaps, but to be judged by the heavens. And so he remained there, between life and death, between earth and sky, a mortal man suspended in the stillness of myth. The Sumerian tablets describe this moment with striking intimacy. Lugalbanda doesn't rage. He doesn't cry out in despair. He reflects. He prays. These moments are not filled with action but with awareness, the inward motion of a soul poised on the edge of being. And his prayers are some of the earliest recorded poetry in human history. They are carefully preserved hymns, structured, lyrical, and devotional. More than mere pleas, they are offerings of language, shaped with the care of someone who believes that words, if well formed, can touch the divine. He addresses the great powers of the Sumerian pantheon, not with demands, but with reverent invocations. To Utu, god of the sun, he prays for clarity and vision, for the light to return to his eyes and drive away the shadows of fever. To Nanna, god of the moon, he prays for coolness and calm, for the gentle hand of night to soothe his burning skin. To Enlil, who controls the winds and the destinies of men, he prays for the strength to rise, not only in body but in purpose. And to Inanna, radiant queen of heaven and mistress of war and passion, he offers his most heartfelt plea, not as a warrior but as a man stripped bare, pleading not for victory, but for grace. The cave becomes a kind of shrine, not built by men, but formed by necessity and spirit. It is here, in this raw place, with stone as altar, silence as incense, and the night sky as witness, that Lugalbanda undergoes his transformation. Time passes. The fire burns low. The food remains untouched. The wind howls through the rocks like the breath of forgotten gods. And then, something begins to change. The texts do not describe a miracle in grandiose terms. There is no lightning, no vision of a god descending in glory. Instead, there is the small, precise shift that precedes all great renewals, a slow return to breath. A flicker of movement, a hand gripping the edge of the blanket, a murmur, then a word. Lugalbanda begins to recover. The fever breaks. His strength returns, not gradually but all at once, as if something unseen has moved through him. The epic compares him to a wild bull, newly awakened, or a mountain goat leaping across the rocks. He is no longer bound by ordinary flesh. Something in him has been touched, altered, set apart. When he stands, he is not the same. The man who could not walk now runs. The man who was abandoned now ascends. The man who lay silent now carries the voice of the gods. He emerges from the cave, not triumphant, but transformed. The story of Lugalbanda has truly begun. When Lugalbanda stepped out of the cave, the mountains no longer loomed as they had before. The air was just as thin, the rocks just as sharp, the sun just as relentless. But he was not the same man who had entered. What had passed through him in that cave was not just healing, but awakening. The epic texts describe him as filled with an energy beyond the limits of human strength. He is said to move like a falcon on the wing, to race like a wild ram across the steppe. His body, once broken, now seemed weightless. His steps devoured distance. And where once there had been confusion and fatigue, now there was clay. The epic texts describe him as filled with an energy beyond the limits of human strength. He is said to move like a falcon on the wing, to race like a wild ram across the steppe. His body, once broken, now seemed weightless. His steps devoured distance. And where once there had been confusion and fatigue, now there was clarity, a sense of purpose and something more, a calm, unshakable confidence that can only come from direct contact with the divine. In Mesopotamian myth, to be healed by the gods was not merely a gift, it was a sign. It marked the recipient as chosen, and those who were chosen had responsibilities. They became vessels of the gods' will. Lugalbanda may have emerged alone, but he would not remain so for long. Before returning to his comrades, he undertook an act that would seal his transformation, a sacred encounter with the supernatural. As he descended from the highlands, he encountered a colossal nest tucked against the cliff face, a chaotic tangle of bone, feather, and golden twigs. Within it, the offspring of a creature unlike any other in Sumerian myth, the Anzû bird. The Anzû was no ordinary animal. In later myths, it is a divine beast with storm in its wings and lightning in its eyes, the stealer of destiny, the enemy of gods. But here in this earlier tale, the Anzû is neither villain nor monster. It is raw, elemental power, and power, in Sumerian thought, is neither good nor evil. It is relational. Lugalbanda finds the young birds crying out in hunger. Their parents are absent. He does not steal from the nest. He does not flee. Instead, he pauses, watches, understands. Then, using what little food he has, he feeds the chicks, honey, berries, bread. He cares for them, gently. It is an act of compassion. But more than that, it is a test. One the gods are surely watching. When the adult Anzû returns and sees a stranger near its nest, its rage is immediate. It shakes the sky. It tears at the wind. But it does not attack. The nest is intact. The chicks are fed. And the intruder stands still, unarmed, unafraid, and respectful. The Anzû does not destroy him. It blesses him. The nature of that blessing is not fully described in the tablets, but its effects are unmistakable. Lugalbanda is changed yet again. His speed becomes legendary, his endurance unmatched. He gains the favor of the gods and the ability to serve them directly. He is no longer just a soldier. He has become a messenger of the divine. He is now ready to rejoin the army, not as the man they left behind, but as someone utterly new, reinvigorated and divinely marked. Lugalbanda raced down the mountain paths as if carried by wind. His transformation was not simply physical. The man who had once been left behind was now chosen, not by men, but by the gods. His limbs were light, his breath steady. He ran with the certainty of one who had been seen and blessed. When he caught up to the army, their reaction was a mixture of awe and disbelief. No one had expected to see him again, not alive, and certainly not like this. His step was effortless, his speech clear and purposeful. There was something in his gaze that suggested he had touched something beyond the human realm. The soldiers murmured to one another, "He is no longer what he was." And then came the test. The campaign had reached a critical point. The army of Uruk was stalled. Enmerkar needed to send an urgent message to the goddess Inanna, his divine patron, calling on her to favor Uruk over Arata. The message had to cross hostile terrain, a span of mountains and valleys riddled with danger, spirits, and exhaustion. No one dared volunteer, except Lugalbanda. The tablets say he stepped forward calmly, not as a braggart, not with pride, but with assurance. He knew he could make the journey. His body, now light as air, could endure. His will was fixed, and perhaps most importantly, he had already been touched by Inanna. He was walking in her orbit now. And so he ran. Lugalbanda became the swiftest courier in Sumerian myth, capable of crossing days' worth of terrain in a single burst of movement. The stories emphasize not just his speed, but his silence. He moved like moonlight over stone. His presence stirred no dust, frightened no bird, left no trail. It was as if the land itself welcomed him, recognizing its own child. When he reached Inanna's temple, whether in Uruk or beyond, the tablets are unclear, he delivered Enmerkar's message. But more than that, he became a living proof of divine favor. His transformation, his endurance, his mercy toward the Anzû, these were all signs Inanna could read. And she responded. Though the exact words are lost, we know Inanna sent a reply. She sided with Enmerkar. Her favor would rest with Uruk, and it was Lugalbanda, reborn, blessed, and tested, who had made that outcome possible. The soldier left behind in the cave had become the instrument of divine diplomacy. Inanna's response to Lugalbanda's mission wasn't just strategic, it was intimate, a moment of divine recognition that reached beyond politics or ceremony. Something about this mortal, this silent, enduring figure, stirred something in her. It wasn't his strength, his rank, or his words that drew her in. It was his stillness, his ability to survive divine silence without turning bitter, his capacity to act with humility where others would boast, his choice to show mercy when he had every excuse to act otherwise. In the Sumerian imagination, this kind of resonance between mortal and deity was rare. Most gods chose their favorites for battle prowess or temple service. But Lugalbanda offered something deeper, a soul refined by hardship, a man shaped not by victory, but by survival and grace. In the epics, Lugalbanda becomes something nearly unprecedented, a mortal beloved by a goddess, not for his conquest, but for his transformation. This is no romance as we know it today. There are no seductions, no flowery speeches, no physical liaisons described. What unfolds between them is older, more sacred, a mythic bond. Inanna, goddess of love and war, of ecstasy and judgment, sees in Lugalbanda a rare mortal who has walked through fire and emerged tempered, not scarred. To be beloved by Inanna was no light blessing. She is the most volatile of the Sumerian deities, passionate, vengeful, and entirely unbound by predictability. Her favor can elevate, but it can also destroy. Those she loves, she tests. Those she chooses, she remakes. And yet Lugalbanda does not flinch. He receives her gaze without arrogance, without fear. He answers her attention with quiet integrity. Later hymns composed in her honor speak of a man lifted from the mountain dust, of one whose feet were anointed by starlight, who became both servant and joy to the goddess. Many scholars believe these passages refer to Lugalbanda. Not only did she restore him to health and vitality, she inscribed his being with something eternal. She didn't merely favor him, she claimed him as one of her own. This divine recognition reshaped his identity. Lugalbanda no longer belonged to the world of ordinary men. He moved with divine sanction. He carried within him the weight and light of Inanna's regard. It was not power in the usual sense, not command over soldiers or cities, but a subtler, deeper authority, one that came from knowing the silence of the gods and surviving it, one that came from walking the line between devotion and dissolution, and choosing again and again to kneel in reverence. And through this bond, he rose, not as a warlord, not as a tyrant, but as something that Sumerian culture revered above all, a mortal in harmony with the divine, a human being so finely attuned to sacred will that he became a vessel of order, wisdom, and sacred continuity. Uruk, the city of Inanna, would remember him not as a supporting figure in Enmerkar's war, but as a ruler in his own right. His reign is recorded on the Sumerian king list, where he appears as the second king of the first dynasty of Uruk. The tablets claim he ruled for 1,200 years, an impossibility, but one that points to something more important than historical fact: symbolic duration. The number itself signals cosmic legitimacy, a reign not measured in seasons, but in significance. And from that reign, from this fusion of mortal endurance and divine grace, something even greater emerged. Because Lugalbanda is not just a hero, not just a survivor, not just a king. He is also the father of Gilgamesh, the most enduring figure in all Mesopotamian literature, and the mythic seeker of immortal truth. Lugalbanda's story didn't end when he returned home safely. Something even more important happened later. He became the father of a boy who would become one of the greatest heroes in ancient stories. That boy's name was Gilgamesh. In the old stories from Mesopotamia, Gilgamesh is described as being part god and part human. His mother, Ninsun, was a goddess known for her wisdom. His father, Lugalbanda, was a man who had been helped by the gods and had even spoken with them. Because of this, Gilgamesh was born very strong but also very curious. He wanted to understand the world and often felt restless inside. Gilgamesh became the most famous king of Uruk. People remembered him not just for building strong city walls and beautiful temples, but for the deep questions he asked. Why do people die? Can we live forever? What makes life important? These big questions are at the center of the epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest stories ever written. Even though the story focuses on Gilgamesh, it's clear that his father was important too. Lugalbanda is mentioned many times as someone Gilgamesh respected and looked up to. When Gilgamesh went on long and dangerous journeys, he often prayed to his father for help. He even left gifts and said special words to honor Lugalbanda before starting his adventures. That shows us that Lugalbanda wasn't just a regular man in Gilgamesh's eyes. He was a source of strength and guidance. Lugalbanda didn't become famous by fighting wars or defeating monsters. Instead, he became important because of his patience, kindness, and deep connection to the gods. He showed that being brave doesn't always mean using a sword. Sometimes it means staying calm, listening, and staying strong when things are hard. Gilgamesh, who faced many dangers and painful losses, carried his father's quiet strength with him. The way Lugalbanda faced suffering and found peace helped shape the kind of man Gilgamesh would become. That makes Lugalbanda more than just a character in an old story. He became the beginning of a legend that people still talk about thousands of years later. So when we talk about Gilgamesh, we should also remember Lugalbanda, not just as his father, but as the man who helped start one of the greatest journeys ever told. If you're interested in learning more about Gilgamesh, the brave king who searched for the secret of life, check out our full video on the Epic of Gilgamesh. Thanks for watching this episode of Myths and Sagas. If you enjoyed learning about Lugalbanda, the mountain hero, the favorite of the goddess Inanna, and the father of a legend, please give us a like, share this video, and subscribe to our channel. There are many more great stories coming your way. Tell us in the comments which ancient hero or god you'd like us to explore next. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story from the ancient world. See you next time. And until then, may the gods keep you safe on your journey.